Hello and welcome to the Feminine Millionaire Show. I'm your host, Polly Alexander, and I'm a success coach, healer, creative, and future millionaire. If creating money and success in a spiritual and feminine way is your goal, this show is for you. Understand how to overcome your past, bring your soul's greatest gifts to the world, and up-level your income, impact, joy, and happiness. Join me each week to be inspired and uplifted as you learn the business, mindset, energetic, and spiritual shifts you can make to create your own wildly abundant life and business. Let's all rise together. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Feminine Millionaire Show. I am super excited to have a fantastic guest on the show today. Her name is Shannon Hayes. She is the author of a newly published book, Redefining Rich. But that's not all. Shannon is the chef and CEO of Sapbush Hollow Farm, LLC. She's the author of several books. This is not her first, including the Grass-Fed Gourmet Cookbook, Long Way on a Little, and Radical Homemakers. And she's the host of the Hearth of Sapbush Hollow podcast, which has chronicles and lessons from a life tied to family, community, and the land. Shannon also holds a PhD in sustainable agriculture and community development from Cornell University. Welcome, Shannon.
Polly, I am so excited to be talking to you today. I think this is going to be one of my most exciting conversations all week.
I think that's something to live up to. I read all about your life and it's filled with wonderful events and conversations. But first of all, let's celebrate your new book coming out, Redefining Rich. I just want to say, and I haven't quite finished it, but it's one of the most thought-provoking, powerful, yet charming, funny and bold books that I've read in a long time.
I am so excited to hear that. You know, it was a very interesting writing process. A lot of times when writers write books, they come up with a proposal and it goes to the agent and then it goes out before the book is even written and then it's decided and then an editor has a role in developing the manuscript. And on this one, I just said to my husband, I need to do this all by myself, quietly. I don't think I can have anybody tell me what to say. I needed the experience of being with that text and exploring my thoughts and being absolutely free without worrying about whether anybody was going to like it or not, because that book that you're holding in your hands is what had to come from me directly before it could go anyplace else. I couldn't worry about what would sell. There were just things that had to be said.
I love that. I don't know if you know, but I'm an ex-creative. So I spent well over a decade of my life as a full-time photographer. And I totally get that when the creative work just wants to come through you unhindered, untouched by anybody else, uninfluenced. So I think that it's worked beautifully. So I really honor that process.
I'm really thankful it did. And I ended up with a great editor who completely respected that too. And she just let it go. So those are some very freewheeling words that you're holding in your hands. And I feel like there's a lot of magic packed in there, just a lot of creative energy. So I'm glad that you're appreciating it.
100%. I really resonated with that. So I want to start off with a question that I like to ask all of my guests. And I normally ask it at the end of the interview, but we need to answer this question first of all, because it's center to your work and your philosophy in the world. And that question is, what is true abundance for you?
Well, I have to tell you that true abundance for me ended up taking me completely off the conventional trajectory. And it was a question I asked myself at the get-go. I was coming out of Cornell University with my PhD, and I was on the career track to be Dr. Shannon Hayes, professing somewhere. And my husband and I just got shaken to our cores when he got fired from his job. And rather than trying to find new jobs right away, we started asking that question. And we realized that true abundance for us wasn't a position. It wasn't money in the bank. It was connection We were in love. We wanted to stay in love. We wanted to be with our family, and we wanted to have our feet in the soil, our toes dabbling in streams, and be sitting in the woods. True abundance for us means you get to sleep with your dog at night and your dog can stay with you all day long. And you get to be around family and have meaningful friendships and community life. And when we realized that, it completely changed how we looked at what we would do for a living.
So you almost reverse engineered it. You started off with this vision of true abundance, and then you started looking at what can I do to create that?
Yes. I should back up and say, I grew up on Sapbush Hollow Farm. So my family's had this land since 1979, and I was trained to go in an entirely different direction. I say I lived in the hills in this very, very Appalachian culture, northern Appalachian culture, where subsistence farming was quite common. But I went to school in the valley, and that valley was on the suburban fringe of New York's capital city of Albany, and go to college and have a career was what the focus was on. So I was raised and educated in that culture, but at the same time, I was living this subsistence farm life on my weekends because I always hung out with my elderly neighbors on the farms. And so I had an awareness that they had a wealth that I never knew them to need a thing. I never knew them to be wanting in any way. And yet, as I grew into adulthood and stepped in to help them with some of their financials, I realized that they'd never earned any kind of money that the world would consider significant. They were at poverty level incomes. And I recognized that they had taught me skills my whole life to live outside of a conventional economy. And I had learned how to grow food. I'd learned how to cook and how to can, how to repair my things. And so when my husband and I realized true abundance was about family and connection and being in touch with the wilderness and having good food, that's always a big thing for me. We understood that we also had been equipped with the skills to live that way. And so we didn't have to go racing after a career in order to live. We were able to step into that and build a life and become entrepreneurs with the family and community and wilderness as our landscape.
You paint an incredible picture in your book of what life on the farm is actually like. And in your podcast, you managed to address it with such delightful humor. But being serious for a moment, it's a tough life. Farming is a tough life. How did you break the belief that you have to work hard to make money?
We have a joke in farming that says, if you'd like a wine cellar, put 100 farmers in the basement because they'll whine all the time. And here in the United States, we have been raised to think of ourselves, our agricultural industry, a lot of us have been raised to think of ourselves as victims. There's a cheap food policy. We have a net negative income on average in the United States. The average farm loses at least $1,500 a year. There's a farm bill that works against the small independent farmers, and we wear that almost as a badge of honor, and we use it to fight and to try to get more rights. It really is a struggle to get attention, to get a fair price for what we do. But the problem with that is if you wear that badge all the time, then you think of yourself as being a victim all the time. And that's a dangerous way to live because then you see yourself as being overworked and underpaid and a victim of the rest of the world. And if you feel that way, then farmers can't do the most important work that we have, which is nourish the soil, grow food, feed community. We are hugely important for society. And so I realized as I came in and took over, my family farm right now is 3 generations. My daughters are the 4th generation. I realized when I stepped to the helm as the CEO that carrying that mindset of being a victim farmer was going to poison my life. And I realized that I was in farming and I saw myself as the steward of all of these resources, the soil, the water, the sunlight, and the air. And I was responsible for trying to get a living while safeguarding and protecting. But what I forgot was that I chose this vocation because I loved it. Like I said, I knew what true abundance was. My husband and I had decided that at the get-go. And knowing what true abundance was, I somehow had fallen into this slump of believing I was a victim, and believing the story of the victim farmer led me to not be very happy until one moment I said, well, wait a minute. If the soil and the water and the sunlight and the air are my charges, aren't they also my pay? Aren't they also what I enjoy in my life? I mean, wasn't that what was in our true, what we call a quality of life statement, where we identified our true abundance? And in doing that, I started to realize, well, then I'm going to enjoy it. And my husband and I started taking off every morning and going out into the woods and sitting there with our coffee, away from our cell phones and the internet and away from the pressures. And, we spent more time skinny dipping with our kids, and we just realized that this life is rich and delicious. And rather than fighting the fight all the time, we decided to enjoy it. That simple step actually led us to improve the farm's bottom line. We started to realize that, this is a game. And ultimately, we have what we want. We have the great food, we have the family, we have the community. So then we are able to step back, just like you and I were talking about before, and not take it so seriously. Look at it as a game and play. And as we did, it was incredible how our family and business grew. We started working less. We started gaining more. We had more free time. We had a lot more fun. We started fighting less. It's been amazing. It's been a terrific journey.
That's so exciting to hear. I absolutely love that. So your passion and your love for what you do, the realization that you're a steward of the land, of the soil, the sunshine, the rivers, and then just really giving yourself permission to enjoy it. That's what I hear. Like, you made the decision. It came with the awareness.
I am very concerned about climate change. There's no doubt about it. And, I was raising young children that I wanted them to be very dedicated to the future of the earth. But you start to realize, if you just worry about the problems all the time and you don't stop and put your toes into soil, and you don't go wading in a nearby pond, or, take a swim in the ocean, whatever it is, you don't feel those things, or you don't let your children feel those things, then people become apathetic and detached. The natural resources that are here, they nourish us, they fulfill our spirits, and they give us the strength to get up and do the work that needs to be done to heal this earth another day. It's not all just a fight and a struggle. It's about taking nourishment, taking sustenance. We have agreed to be on this planet at this time. So we need to nourish ourselves and really enjoy this life, because that's what keeps us strong to keep healing this planet for the next generation.
I love that. I just want to sit with that for a minute. My toes in the soil and the sun on my face, and I'm sitting in that forest. And I really understand what you mean experientially. I had a moment a few months ago when I realized, hold on, I'm living in my dream location. I have all the things I wanted around me. Why am I not being more present with it? Why am I not engaging with it more, enjoying it more? And since then, I've made a more conscious decision to go out and walk in the forest. I was sat meditating there on Saturday morning when everybody's dog decided to come into that piece of forest and chase me. But it was that awareness to engage with it and to be nourished by it and to enjoy it. And I really love that you drew the parallel with that, with people being engaged and caring about the environment when they're being nourished by it. Let's switch tacks. What's the money paradox that you describe in the book?
The money paradox was the key to me finding my financial solvency, at least in my peace of mind. And the first thing to know, so there's a whole chapter or a section in the book called The Money Paradox, and it's getting quite a lot of attention in the economic world right now. The first thing to know about money in the money paradox is that money has absolutely nothing to do with wealth. And everybody always assumes that money in the bank means that you're wealthy, but it's really money is just a tool for facilitating transactions. And there are many tools in life for facilitating transactions. It's a good one. It's a handy one. It's certainly a lot more lightweight than, carrying around sacks of potatoes and live chickens everywhere. There's definitely an efficiency to it, but we need to detach from this idea that those, what the bank says you have is somehow an indicator of what your wealth is. So the first thing in understanding the money paradox is it has nothing to do with wealth. And if you heed this, it's a lot better than if you think it does, because if you think it does, you run the risk of getting fixated on the idea of scarcity. And you start to think that money will determine your happiness if you're after wealth. And then you're going to miss out on all the fun stuff that's around you. So that's why the money paradox is money has absolutely nothing to do with wealth. And there are 3 corollaries that go with that. And the first one is, it seems if you understand that money has nothing to do with wealth, and the first one is very intuitive. Increased income does not guarantee increased happiness. A lot of research has been done on this. If you don't have enough heat to stay warm at night, if you don't have enough food in your belly and you're not safe during the day, then probably some more income is going to help you be happier because you're going to be safe and fed and warm. So up to a certain point, money does increase happiness. There is a correlation between more money and more happiness. But after your fundamental needs are met, there is no correlation whatsoever to your happiness. What researchers have found has more to do with happiness is, family relationships, work, community and friends, health, personal freedom, personal values, projects that engage your mind. I've found that, the problems are actually part of my happiness. I like working on the problem of making small farms viable in the United States, exciting life puzzles and challenges that increases happiness. But money, it only plays a very, very small part. So that's corollary 1. Increased income does not guarantee increased happiness. And then corollary number 2 is that too much wealth, too much material wealth can actually be stagnating. And basically, simply put, the more you have, the more you stand to lose. So if you have a lot of stuff and you're trying to take care of all the stuff and you're warehousing your stuff and paying rent to store your stuff in a storage vat someplace, and you're worried about losing your stuff and all you do is think about your stuff, how do you move forward with your dreams in life? How do you move forward with building a world that's going to matter for your children and your children's children? How are you going to have fun and take risks and live adventures if you're worried about holding on to and protecting all your material wealth? So we need to be cautious. It's not to say that having money is bad, but we do need to have an understanding that too much material wealth can just add to our worries, and it can be stagnating if we're trying to live free, engaging, and creative lives where we're making a difference. And the final corollary to the money paradox. This one, my husband and I laugh about this all the time. You will always want more money. No matter how much money you have, you will always want more money. And we had this discovery. We came up with this third corollary one morning. It was a beautiful, beautiful wintry morning, and we were going down the steps of our house. We were heading out into the woods to drink our morning coffee. We do it all year long, sitting outside with our coffee and cocktails. And when we skipped outside, we were really happy. We were in love and the sunlight was beautiful and there were snowflakes in the air and the dogs were fluffing in the snow and rolling around. They were just as cute as could be. And everything was fine. And we were playing an imaginary game as we were. What would happen if we got like a sudden windfall of, $10,000? And so we started talking about, if we had $10,000, what would we do with it? And we thought, well, maybe instead of our budget vacation, we would take a more expensive vacation. Maybe we would fly to Ireland and do a walking tour. But then we realized that we have this old car that's got 200,000 miles on it. It's probably going to need some work done on it. So we might need some of that money for that car. And then we thought about this leak we have in the roof of our cafe. Maybe we should get that repaired instead of patching it. And then we just kept thinking about different projects and different things that needed to be fixed. And within like 7 minutes of that walk, we were seeing ourselves as poor again. And that $10,000 windfall that we had imagined upon ourselves had just completely dried up. And we were like worrying about money all of a sudden. But when we started our walk, everything was fine. There was no problem. And that's when we realized, oh, you'll always want more money. You're always going to have a desire for one thing more than you can actually afford. And if you recognize that human tendency, then you can sort of put that on a shelf and say, yeah, isn't that funny? That's just a little phenomenon. And you throw that idea on a shelf. Oh, yeah, you always want more money and there will never be enough money. So stop worrying about it. Stop thinking about it. Stop, trying to lose the delight in the life that we get because you're worried about getting more money. Instead, enjoy the time that you have with your parents. Enjoy the time you have with your partners, with your family members. Enjoy laughing with your friends over a beer. And don't let that idea of having to have more money pollute the great things that life has to offer all of us.
So powerful. It reminds me of a game I played with myself the other week, and I gave myself £1 million a day to spend. The first day, it took me a long time to spend that money. I was spending 10K here, 10K there, 20K. I was like, man, we've still got another $500,000 to spend. I felt like it was so pressurized. Okay. Then by day 4, day 5, I ran out of money by the end. $1 million a day wasn't enough. My visions got bigger. The projects I could create got grander. They needed more resources. These people, these projects needed paying for. So as my wealth grew through the week, my vision grew, and it couldn't catch up. The wealth couldn't catch up with the vision. I totally resonate.
There's an interesting phenomenon that I've watched with this idea with the money paradox. So my family has had this particular plot of land since 1979. As I said, I'm third generation farmer. And Sapbush Hollow has now been in business for over 40 years. And we've been recognized as one of the most sustainable, innovative farms in the country. So when you get that distinction, you are a target for advice for a lot of people starting out. And I can't tell you how many people we've seen who decide they're going to get into the farming because they've made their wealth in something else. So they have a lot of money and they want to start farming. And they say, I can afford to do this. I can afford to buy the land. I can afford to buy the equipment. Anything that goes wrong, I can afford to have the best people fix it. And I can afford to hire the best people to market my product. And they come in strong with all the resources behind them. And we've learned on the farm that that is a symptom that they're going to fail. Because if you have the money to just fix everything and you don't have to grow to understand your problems deeply and to engage with them from a realistic resource base, then you can just write a check for everything. And in farming, I'll tell you, you can just farm that away so fast and not have real, enduring, sustainable solutions. It is amazing. It's the poor people, not the poor people, but the people who come in who are resource tight, who have to really be creative and innovative, do real problem solving, and they have to build social networks and collaborative relationships, and they cannot write a check for everything because it's not there for them to do. Those are the people who really build resilient, long-lasting legacy farms. And I've seen it over and over again. And that history of watching that phenomenon, it's completely counterintuitive. You know, we see these people coming in with money and you go, oh, wow, they're going to be able to do everything way better than I can. They can really market. They can really go far. They can buy all the cool toys that you need. But we've just seen it over and over again. They can't make it work. They cannot make it work. It's the ones who learn to be scrappy, who develop grit. That's what it takes. And then they learn to enjoy a good life.
Let's talk about income diversification, because that's been so important for you to be able to create a living from Sapbush Hollow Farm. Without that, you would not be able to enjoy the life you do or even keep the farm alive. So I'd love you to share more with our listeners about what that is and why it's so important for entrepreneurs.
Okay. I love to wax poetic about nature and toes in fresh water and, living a free life. But if you walked in and looked at my desk, you would see numbers crunching all over the place because I'm actually, some people smoke cigarettes, some people do drugs. My nervous habit is crunching numbers. I love to crunch numbers. I find it very soothing. When I was at Cornell working on my PhD in sustainable agriculture, I learned about the importance on a farm of diversification. And in farming, they think that diversification, the way I was taught was, well, that's corn and soybeans and wheat. Now, let me tell you about all three of those things. Number one, they're crops. And so they're all crops that you put in the ground, and they're all sold on the commodity market. And they're all things that are subject to floods and droughts. Other than that, they have three different names. They're really all the same. So farming's idea of diversification is kind of limited. I was a meat farmer. We live in the hills and we do grass-fed farming where the animals are just out grazing. And so we were taught that diversification is diversification of animal species. You don't have just sheep. You have chickens and beef and cows and pigs. And when you're working with the ecosystem, those things all have different relationships where they support each other. And the chickens help reduce the parasites for the sheep, and then the sheep eat what the cattle can't graze. And there's a lovely synergy with all of them. But I learned in farming that that's what diversification is. But as I came to the helm of my family's business, I started to realize every form of diversification that we were doing was creating more work. And so we diversified with the different livestock species. And then my husband and I have a history of writing cookbooks, and I'm quite a cook. So we started a cafe that's a farm to table cafe here in West Fulton, tied to our farm. I got to tell you, running a cafe and being a chef, if you think farming's hard work, get into being a chef and running a restaurant because that's a lot of work too. And I had my whole family, we were doing chores in the morning and running into the cafe and running the cafe for breakfast and lunch. And then, doing chores at the end of the day. And there was this one day my dad had finished up watering the chickens and he came in to help me wash dishes in the cafe. And it was so hot that day. And we were both sweating like crazy and we were so tired. And my dad's hard of hearing. And I just finally shouted out to him, Dad, we have to find a way to make money doing nothing. And I'm the idea person on the farm. I'm always coming up with new products and new services. And he looks at me and he's just sweating up a storm. And he turns, and he heard this even with his hearing aid turned down. And he looks at me and he says, Shannon, that's the best idea you've had yet. And I realized that diversification, particularly in my line of work, which is very physical, I don't need to go out and do an aerobic workout every day because we will walk 5 to 10 miles every single day just in the course of what we do, lifting, moving, hauling, and working. And when you work with your body like that, you realize that diversification really needs to be different because we all have injuries. We all have health problems that challenge us. And so you must have money for doing nothing as well. And getting into that led me to understand that there are actually 4 different types of income that we need to employ to make it to be independent and happy. And so the first type of income, which is the most conventional one that people understand, is earned income. And it's actually the most expensive form of income. That is where you go to a job every day and at the end of the week, you get a paycheck. And a lot of people place very high value on earned income. But what they don't realize is that in most countries, it is the most expensive form of income there is. And the book explains how that works in depth. But basically, all the taxes are taken out, and then whatever's left, you get to live on. And so earned income is lovely because it's very predictable. But if it's not doing something that speaks to your soul, that's you're there saying, I was born to do this and I am jumping out of bed without an alarm clock in the morning because this is why I am walking this earth. If it's not deeply meaningful, then you really should be questioning it because earned income is expensive. So that's the first type of income. The second type of income is employment income, business income. Not employment income, rather business income. And self-employment, running a company, entrepreneurial income. And the beauty of that is that it is less expensive to earn self-employment income, to earn business income, because basically the government lets you pay for everything you need for your business, and then you are taxed on what is left. I have charts in the book to help people see the difference between employment income and self-employment income. I have, two characters, a brother and a sister. The brother holds a steady job and the sister works for herself. And the sister technically only earns about $12,000 a year. And the brother is earning about almost $100,000 a year. And at the end of the year, she actually has more money in the bank than he does. And that's because the business write-offs really make business income much more affordable to have. So those are the two forms of income. The third form of income is non-monetary income. And a lot of people completely overlook this. But non-monetary income is the stuff that you can do for yourself so that you don't have to pay someone else to do it. And in my way of life, you can probably figure out from what I talked about before with my Appalachian neighbors, this is a huge form of income for my family. Non-monetary income. Some people might do it as homemakers. They do it by cooking for themselves, repairing things for themselves, growing their own food. There are a lot of different ways that people can have non-monetary income. They can barter, exchange services. In my family, non-monetary income is actually our single greatest source of income. I crunched the numbers to figure it out for the book, and I think we came in that year in particular at about $70,000 worth of non-monetary income. It's huge, and a lot of us overlook it. Childcare, if you're taking care of your own children, that has a lot of value. If you're helping to care for an elderly family member, that counts in that as well. So that's non-monetary, and none of that is taxable. So that's valuable too. And then we have our final form of income, which is what I called money for doing nothing, which is passive income. And passive income, it could be royalties. It could be rental units, vacation rentals. It could be investing in another business and getting residuals from that. There are lots of different forms of passive income. So those are the four types. You have conventional, meaningful employment, and then you have self-employment, and then non-monetary income, and then passive income. And what I recommend for economic thriving and survival is that you choose three of those. And the three that you choose will have to depend on something called the quality of life statement, which you and I touched on earlier, identifying what true abundance is in your life. You and the members of your family work at developing that quality of life statement, identifying what true abundance is, and then the three forms of income that you choose need to line up with that. And that's going to create very powerful synergy between all the different things that you do and a lot of economic resilience as well as joy. So that's what we discuss in Redefining Rich about how income works.
And that's a great chapter. You go into a lot of detail, and I think it's really interesting and really opens up that whole way of thinking about income.
Yeah. And it's very important here, again, as I said, because if you're working with your body, it's so easy to go out of commission. We forget that when we're young and healthy. But, you start to get to my age and you start to recognize I need to have more diversity than just chickens and pigs. I need to have, money coming in if I need to be sick for a couple of weeks. And that is part of the human experience. None of us is absolved of these things. You can count on sooner or later, you need that. So having that passive income, having the non-monetary income, having these different ways of keeping yourself afloat are very, very important.
We're going to have to wrap up shortly, but there's some questions that have come up I'd love to ask you. And the first one is that I'm curious to know where your independent spirit, your pioneer spirit came from, because you really are rejecting a lot of the collective rhetoric around how we should live our lives, how we should earn money, what we should be happy with. How much do you think came from the way you were brought up versus who you are as a spirit?
Oh, wow. No one's ever asked me that before. Well, my brother and I were raised in the same household, and my brother has a very good job and he's a very responsible person. Now, so I was going to say a lot of it has to do with me being brought up by these Appalachian neighbors who spent a lot of time in my life just teaching me these skills. So I would have to say it's 50-50. Things happen in life to push us in a certain direction. And, I was really trying to follow the career track. I really, really was. but I was a very free thinker on the tight career track, and I just started making observations about how women were treated in academia. And I started thinking about what that would mean for me in my future. I watched my husband, who is an articulate and passionate environmentalist. I watched him get fired for insubordination at his job. And you start to realize that there really isn't a meritocracy. It started to look to me like this was all a game and a way that I was going to lose out on life. It was personal, but there were just a lot of experiences that I was gifted with skills to not need it. And then even though I followed that path, I started having enough things unfold in my life where I realized it was worth taking the jump and pursuing this other way. I had seen these subsistence farmers in Appalachia do just fine. And I realized that I was completely comfortable with that way of life. So I was willing to jump and take that risk. And I have never regretted it. Never for a moment.
I want to see more. I want to be on Satbush Hollow Farm. What about like a documentary or reality TV? Would you ever do anything like that?
Well, the funny thing is somebody did. I wrote a book called Radical Homemakers, and somebody came out and they stayed with me for 3 days and filmed. And at the end of it, she just threw her arms up and she said, "There's just no drama."
On this in your book, the chapter on organization.
That's true. That's true. She didn't see me in the cafe, and she saw me, quietly schooling my children at home. So she wasn't there at the right chaotic moments. But her cameraman was trying to film one of our alpacas, who's one of our guardian livestock, and he just knuckled up in his mouth and spit right on the camera and gave him the money shot. So he got something from the experience. You have to sit around. It's a slow pace of life, and it takes a real lens. It takes a real lens to see it. I do tell a lot of the stories in my podcast. Almost every week there's a story of what befalls us, but I don't think a camera crew has the patience to sit around and watch.
I'm going on the podcast because I'm like, what do you mean? So much happens. There's so many dramas. But I guess condensed into a podcast episode.
That's right. And it's all about who the storyteller is. That particular person couldn't see it, but I eventually started telling my own stories, and those are the ones that I reveal.
And I'm so glad you did. You are such a beautiful and engaging storyteller.
Well, I think we should do a house swap, and you can come out here and you can live this life, and then I'll live your life on that island, and we'll see how we both do.
Oh my gosh, well, you're going to thrive. You'll be like foraging in the forest near here. You'll be great. I will just flail and die instantly. I don't like cooking.
But it'll make for good drama.
Oh, it would be wonderful if one of those great home swaps. You'll have created a neighbourhood farm in the month you're here. You'll have all sorts of ventures going on. You'll know more people than I do.
Well, I'm sure they're all going to come around and they're going to want to know about you. That's for sure. You'll be an exotic intrigue, and you'll give everyone just weeks and weeks of things to discuss. So
my nickname is the Reluctant Chef. So I would do. I can actually cook. I'm just very reluctant to do it. You're such a visionary. You're such a game changer in how you approach life, in how you navigate things. What would be a dream for you to create?
Getting rid of more of my stuff. I talk in the book about organization and decluttering and how important I feel that is. And one of the things I always talk about is yes, I recognize it as so important because it is just an ongoing journey in my life to figure out how to declutter. Because when you farm and every piece of baling twine and every piece of duct tape has an alternative purpose, and balancing that out with wanting to, have this clean, light, unfettered life, it really makes for some very interesting, dramatic tension, I have to tell you. I've learned that, wow, this is an interesting quest because I have a lovely home, but I live with all these teenagers now. And I'm always swallowed up with the mess of very creative, very lovely teenagers who just, really can create chaos within seconds in my house, and hairy shedding dogs and cats and livestock and all kinds of things. So there's that, learning, how to streamline and still live blissfully in all this chaos.
I have a pretty minimalist home, so you'd probably feel very peaceful here.
Well, maybe you could really fix that over here.
I'm not the reluctant declutterer.
There you go.
I actually find to create, I need to have a clean environment. I found this out when I was a photographer, that if I had too much clutter around me, it was like my brain was full and there wasn't space to create.
I agree with that. I used to think that people who were unduly tidy had stifled minds. And then I started to learn how that impacts me as well. But I have this interesting life where I live with 3 generations of people. Now, my parents aren't in the same house. They're just down the road, but we're all living and working together and sharing resources and trying to achieve that aesthetic, which really is very soothing and calming for me and creatively inspiring, to negotiate that with a life that is very messy. I mean, sheep giving birth, pigs needing castration, dogs shedding, creative children. Both of my daughters have sewing machines and dress forms, and they cover my kitchen table with things. You know, it's just negotiating that is a real challenge. And I'm always learning. And then it's like, okay, maybe just my desk has to be tidy.
Absolutely. Carve out your corner.
That's right. That's right.
So I'd love to finish by, well, first of all, let's tell people where they can find out more about you. So firstly, your book, Redefining Rich, is now available on Amazon and all other book platforms and stores. I strongly recommend it. It's an amazing, entertaining, and very powerful and supportive read that will actually help you craft your plan. But you also have a website called theradicalhomemaker.net. Is that correct?
Yeah, theradicalhomemaker.net or satbush.com. They both bring you to the same website. And that talks about the farm, and it talks about the cafe and shows the weekly specials for our farm to table cafe, where it's just a really great, we didn't even really get into that today, this community gathering spot. And then it also has my blog and podcast there with my weekly stories. And during the growing season, every week there's a new story up about some bit of chaos and drama that unfolds here at Satbush Hollow, or I explain some of these business concepts and let people look at it. But it's a fun site to visit because one of the things I've learned about my journey, Polly, is I don't have it together. I really don't. I'm happy, but I am screwing up all the time. And I realize that's part of the blessing of the journey, is to be able to look at that, learn from it, experience it. So if you want to see someone doing everything perfectly and making all the best decisions, I don't know, find another website to go to. But if you're looking for inspiration to recognize that, you know, we are all on a journey and the screw ups are part of what makes the adventures in life so darn fun. If you can laugh about them afterwards, then come on over to theradicalhomemaker.net. Or, you know, check out the book. You'll see lots of screw ups there and realize that we can all muddle forward in our deeply imperfect ways and grow from those experiences.
And Shannon also has a Redefining Rich workbook available on the website as well.
Yes.
We'll put a link in the show notes to all of those resources as well.
Great. And that workbook is free. So yeah, go on over and download that. You can start working on your quality of life statement. The workbook talks to you about the different forms of income and measuring that up against your quality of life statement. So there's some very handy free tools that are available there.
And you can log that as non-monetary income, right?
Yes. There you go. I could put a value on that. Worth $999. Yours now for free.
In my money program, my clients have to log their non-monetary income. So that would definitely be logged. So thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for being such an amazing guest. If there was to be a legacy of the book that you would like, what's one thing you'd like people to take away from what you bring to the world in Redefining Rich?
I want every person to realize that changing this world, healing this planet, and having a happy life is within their power. Every person, whether you are on a farm, in a city, on an island, in the suburbs, you have the power to take your life and make it about the things that matter, about the soil, the water, the sunlight, the air, and the human connections. I want every single person to realize it's not just a creative, lucky few who can do this, but every single one of us. Because if every single one of us can come to that understanding, heck, if only half of us can, we can start moving this planet in the direction that it needs to go. We will become more resilient. The waters will run clear. The air will get pure. These are all things that we need to do. And the thing is, it's not just horrible work that has to happen. It's beautiful, empowering work that lets us enjoy our lives. And I want people to see that and understand that.
Thank you. I think that's a beautiful place to end. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of The Feminine Millionaire Show. This was one of the most thought-provoking conversations I've had on the show, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Now, I'm excited to share that I have just reopened the doors to my powerful, life-changing mastermind. Now, that's my clients' words, not mine. So if you are making between 2 to 6K a month in your business and looking to scale to 10K plus months or 6-figure years, then you need to check out this Business Accelerator. It's a powerful business program with trainings, teachings, masterminding, energy work, personal development to help you to 6 figures in your business and beyond. Some of the successes from the last year that we've seen are a success coach go from a €400 month to her first 10K month in 6 months. A healer go from €100 sessions to selling 3,500 programs regularly and creating 5-figure months whilst working full time. And creative business owners diversifying, launching new ways of delivering their gifts, having far more fun, and hitting 5-figure months. Enrollment is open for the next 2 weeks for a September start, so go visit thrivebeautifully.com to find out more and schedule a conversation with me about what could be the next steps to grow your business and to explore if this could be the right fit for you. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye for now.